Hi everyone, this is the CEO AMA with me. Okay, I'm confused. Why are we also recording if we're live streaming?
Oh, I just hit that every now and then. Sometimes the YouTube will like cut out in the middle. So I just needed that as a backup.
Oh, that makes sense. I wasn't aware. Maybe someone can add that to the handbook. But this is CEO AMA, and Lucas, thanks for the first question. You're not around to vocalize. Maybe Christy can do so.
Yeah, absolutely. So Lucas asked, we have a press kit image of you working on a tablet. How is your setup? Do you sometimes work from a tablet, and what kind of work do you do on it?
Thanks for that. I must say I used the tablet quite a bit before I had the Apple M1 laptop, because the old laptop, it got hot, it was noisy, it didn't last too long on battery. But since the M1, I tend to just use the laptop, and I don't bring the tablet anymore. On vacations, I'm only using it basically to watch YouTube and F1 TV. So it's maybe we should update the press kit, but thanks for the question. Hope that answered it. Sijbrandij.
Yes, important question. How's the marathon training going?
So for context, everyone, Sijbrandij is trying to sign up a lot of GitLab leadership for the marathon he's organizing. But I ran a half marathon, and I'm wise enough not to sign up for a whole one. So he didn't get there. I did walk yesterday on an incline on the treadmill yesterday, watching someone filling land and a boat build, and I added the links for those.
So yeah, we're still waiting for your commit.
Thanks, David.
I don't see David on the call, so I'll verbalize. How's your racing lights are going? Any pictures? And you have a car or plane you find yourself coming back to often?
Yeah, thanks for that. I added a picture to the doc of the setup. It's going pretty well. And normally what we do is we play iRacing on Zandvoort. I'm from the Netherlands, so pretty cool that that's now an F1 circuit, but we don't drive an F1 car because that's really hard. So we drive an Audi RS3. And then with iRacing, it's a bit more complex to go head to head. You have to have your own server stuff. So if we want to go head to head, we do the Formula One game edition 22, and we use the local network to do that.
Great, and I'll verbalize for David again. What context do you see Friends and Family Day? We've been doing them for over a year, and I would bet some team members don't know we didn't have them before COVID. Do you still see them tied to the stress of COVID?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Yes, they're still tied to the stress of COVID. It's important to remind people maybe of that, so that we keep that connotation. Christina.
Great. And I'll verbalize for Christina. Hi, Sid. I saw your tweet earlier this week on 100 reasons not to go to graduate school, and I'd love to know if you agree or disagree with the general sentiment and what prompted the post. And a follow-up question. This tweet is timely because I was going to ask your general opinion about our GitLab for Education program requirements, that in order to enroll and receive benefits, the entity must be a degree-granting institution. What are your general thoughts on opening up the program to nonprofits that increase diversity in tech through alternate pathways of learning?
That's a great question. Thanks for that. Sometimes graduate school is a good idea, sometimes not. It depends. I do think that when I was in school, school seemed the most important thing in the world, because you're there then, and it's almost automatic that you try to go for the highest achievable possible, which seemed graduate school. So I think there's a bit of an information problem where you get a lot of signals from schools and not a lot of signals from the outside world. So that's why I tweeted that, for the few people who were in school and might never have seen that. I agree in general, but average is not what you should do. You should make up your own mind. But I do agree with the sentiment that a lot of graduate school is not a great way to invest your time and money. Although, for example, a Stanford MBA is probably a really great investment. And I know tons of Stanford MBAs. And Ian of Mattermost also responded. So to that tweet, I encourage people to read that. Your second point, hey, should we have GitLab for education only for degree granting institutions, or should we expand it? I'm very much in favor of expanding it. You mentioned a few really cool ones. We think Code with Classy, Rails Girls, those are awesome. What comes to mind also is Masterclass. They just raised a Series A for 100 million. I think that's a really cool model. I love Free Code Camp, which is a not-for-profit free education, which is even better. Masterclass is a for-profit, so that might not be great for the list. But Free Code Camp certainly comes to mind, and I hope we can expand our program to those not-for-profits. I'd be in favor of that.
Great, and I'll verbalize 7 for Yannick. With the current public market craziness going on and the Y Combinator asking its portfolio founders to plan for the worst, what's your take about the future of the idea of a startup, which is VC funded and needs a very long time to reach its goals? Do you still see the idea around in, let's say, 3 to 5 years? And if not, any thoughts on other company structures that could create innovation?
Yeah, thanks for the question. VC-funded startups are certainly not the only companies that create innovation, both like big cash flow companies, like mature companies, and small kind of cash flow companies generate a ton of innovation. But it tends to be that the fastest growing companies are VC-funded. And the reason is that if you grow really fast, you need a ton of money. Frequently, you have to kind of finance all the sales costs and the go-to-market costs up front. And if you grow really fast, it makes sense to invest a ton in R&D, even though you don't have a ton of revenue yet, and you need VC money to do that. So I think it makes total sense for there to be VC-funded companies. We're seeing already like lower valuations, harder to fundraise, which is not necessarily a super bad thing, where we're coming off an era where the valuations were extremely high, sometimes 200 times revenue, and where a lot of companies got funded, even ones who weren't great. So I think it's a bit more of a return to normality, and then maybe we swing the other way where it becomes abnormal, and even the really great companies can get funding. But we'll see what happens. Right now, there's still a lot of dry powder for a lot of funds. And I linked a YouTube presentation by David Sachs, ex-CEO of Zenefits, who I thought had some great points, especially the slide they show at the timestamp I linked.
Great. Marshall, number 8.
Hey, Sid. So I remember when I was a customer back in 2018, I was really excited about the GitLab serverless stuff. Can you provide some context around the decision to sort of abandon that project? I know you noted here that it wasn't used, but as far as I remember, it was also like never on the default path. It wasn't something that you could just use out of the box with your GitLab installation. So how from your perspective, how does that differ from the new Cloud Seed initiative?
Yeah, thanks. And I agree, it wasn't in the default path. On the other hand, I don't think it earned the right to be in the default path. It's a bit of like, if we saw great traction and the only complaint was like, hey, it's hard to set up, but I love it otherwise, then we might have added it, but we didn't see that either. So it failed due to a lack of usage. I see our Cloud Seed initiative by Sri as the kind of spiritual successor. It uses Cloud Run, which uses Knative under the hood. So with Cloud Seed, it's basically a very simple UI to set up Knative. Right now, it's GCP only, but will extend to maybe more platforms. And the nice thing is it's kind of maintainable from day one. It's all Terraform based. And I'm really excited about what Cloud Seed can do. I think Knative makes a ton of sense, but I think the bare metal Knative might have been too hard to use.
Cool, thanks.
You had a good point that says, hey, it still requires people bring a GCP account. Yeah, I think for now, a lot of what we do is assumes that you have an account at one of the 3 hyperclouds, or a lot of what we do, but initiatives like this, like Cloud Seed, and I think that's reasonable.
And just for context, the use cases I have in my head are those areas where like you want to process a webhook, right, and do something within GitLab, and you sort of have to like set up your own server, or whether you're using Cloud Run or some other serverless thing, you still have to like provision infrastructure just to sort of handle a GitLab webhook notification and then bounce that back and do some action within GitLab. So I wonder if there's maybe some opportunity for us to leverage Cloud Seed to close that gap a little bit and not require that people have to bring a full-blown cloud account.
Yeah, and I think many times when we look at what people actually do, it's like that should be in GitLab. And the things that comes to mind, we have an app to help you with triaging stuff. I think it's a separate app. And it's like, why is that a separate app? That should be functionality inside of GitLab. So I think many times when we find ourselves using the GitLab API to do something, it's that we should build it into GitLab. Nikki.
Hey, Sid, good to see you. Wondering how your bike trip was. Thanks for adding the pictures. It looks great.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the question. Added a few pictures, and it was fun biking. It was a half day of biking in the rain, which wasn't as hard as I imagined. It was pretty warm, so that was nice. And we also were a bit afraid we'd be much slower than the rest of the group, but it tends organized bike vacations attract an older audience, so we were more in front than in the back, so that was good. And it was just really beautiful in Pennsylvania. It was really fun seeing that. I did get COVID halfway through, so that was less fun. But we were able to do half the trip, which is great, including seeing the Frank Lloyd Wright house. So that was cool.
Glad you had a good trip. Sorry that you got COVID.
Yeah, well, we were kind of overdue, I guess. Sean.
I'll verbalize. What keeps you motivated in the current global climate with the war, market instability, inflation, COVID, et cetera?
Yeah, all those are pretty serious developments, and I spent time thinking about them. It doesn't affect my motivation much. I think my outlook is more like 7 to 10 years. And in that kind of time period, hopefully a lot of these things will resolve themselves. Not that they got automatically resolved, like lots of people with lots of effort, but hopefully we won't be dealing with them 7 to 10 years from now. And what keeps me motivated, I think we have a great market, a $40 billion DevOps tooling market. I think we have a great team. I think we have very talented, ambitious people at the company. I love our process, love our values, our handbook, the MEC initiative I'm driving this quarter. I love our product. I think we have by far the best DevOps platform. I love our progress, the fast innovation. You see now that we're back to shipping, but that we're shipping a lot more than the last a couple of months ago when we were very focused on security and reliability. We're still focused, but we overcame the backlog that we had, and I'm very proud of 15.0. Lots of new features. Love the growth. I want to work at a grown company. We're hiring close to 1,000 people this year. Last quarter, we had 67% year-over-year revenue growth. That's amazing. I love our gross margins. Gross margins aren't gross. They're really beautiful. They were 89% non-GAAP in the last announced quarter. Companies with higher margins tend to be more fun companies to work to because they're more about increasing revenue and cutting costs compared to low margin companies. And I love our execution. Like we met something that I can't say publicly, and something else that I can't say publicly. But those things that are in the doc, I'm really proud of those. Vladimir.
Yep, sure. My question is about Mac, the framework that was the philosophy that was announced recently. So I'm just curious to hear what's your maybe elevated future vision around it. Why did you decide to work on it? And specifically, why do you think now is a good time for this? And as a follow-up, do you think with GitLab already follow this philosophy?
Yeah, I think we're investing. We have a lot of new managers at GitLab, and we're giving them management training. And I think we're doing an awesome job of teaching them the basics of management. Maybe not the basics, but just management, the stuff that's the same in our company as in other companies. And that's super important. If I could teach them, if I had to pick between that and the stuff that's specific to GitLab, teach them the stuff that's the same in every company. That's the majority of your work. In the majority of things, we're not different than any other company. And nailing that is the most important thing. Having said that, it's also important that we teach them all the stuff that's different in GitLab. And I thought we weren't doing, well, I could add to that. So with Darren Murph and his team, we're trying to add to that. And hopefully it will help not just train people in GitLab, but also serve as an inspiration for other people at other companies. Thanks, Nick.
Hi, I'm new here since like a month or so. It's quite overwhelming, but I'm loving it. And my newly gained responsibility is contributor success. I had many coffee chats, and I wrote it in the document as well with many different kind of people at GitLab. One thing I noticed that there's like a lot of different meanings to the word contribution or even contributor in a way, and to whose success we should strive for. There's also a lot of conversations happening in the open source space regarding non-code contributions, such as design reviews, accessibility, event organizers, etc. But also this new vision behind Mac emphasizes the word everyone. And I think you once mentioned, I went into the document, once said that open source projects in particular need contributions. So you need usage and adoptions in order to get those contributions. And then maybe to add some more context, currently our metrics mainly take merge requests into account, which is code contributions or markdown or anything within the merge space. So my question was like, what are your thoughts on non-code contributions and how should or if GitLab strive for this healthy balance between the two?
Yeah, great question. Both are important, and non-code contributions are of a very wide variety. And I think one reason why we're measuring code contributions versus the non-code contributions, because the variety makes it hard. Like someone contributing to the docs, I think we see that as a code contribution currently, which makes sense to me. Someone contributing to a design review could be like super high impact. But there's also like, what is contributing? Is tweeting about us contributing? Is leaving a comment on an issue contributing? Is leaving a post in the forum contributing? Like there's probably higher value and lower value things. And if we bunch all of that together, then probably it's not apples to apples. So that's the struggle I have. If you do want to kind of broaden it and look at other high impact contributions, I'm all ears, but I can't think of a great way to do that yet.
Oh, that makes sense. I have like a bunch of ideas, but maybe I'll do that async.
Yeah, or feel free to schedule a coffee chat if you want to discuss sync.
Great. I'll verbalize. When you look back fondly on the early days of GitLab's start, is there anything that stands out to you as important to keep driving you forward? And is there any impactful advice you would love to give yourself if you could?
I think one very impactful thing was when we 2 weeks into Y Combinator. We said, look, we're going to take the stuff we want to do for the next 2.5 months, and we're going to do them in the next 2 weeks. I think that kind of iteration and that like, hey, let's get this done faster is super important. And I try to instill it in the company every chance I get. Okay, let's make it smaller and do it faster. I think it's very easy as a bigger and bigger company to have timelines that are further and further out, like everything taking a quarter by default, things like that. Advice back in time, I would say GitLab.com is going to be a bigger success than you thought, and you should invest more in it, because otherwise you're going to be behind for a couple of years. That's the advice I'd going back in time. Cameron.
Hey, Sid, another follow-up question about mech. Was reading about it and would like to hear from you how implementing this movement would help in some of the following ways, namely increase our talent brand and brand awareness among executives, and also help organizations become more effective and equitable.
Yeah. My suspicion is that a lot of the things we do in Mac are just, although the other organizations don't do it, they probably should. I think they are things you should do in a more modern kind of knowledge worker organization. And I hope that as we are able to better articulate those lessons, that people will say, oh, that makes a ton of sense. We're going to embrace the Mac way of working at our company. And that will allow then the people in those companies become aware of GitLab, and they become aware of GitLab, the product. I also think a lot of our practices help people contribute, like writing things down allows people to kind of give suggestions and argue with stuff and falsify things and contribute to them. If you make decisions in a back room and you never write them down, like there's nobody else can contribute. So I think our mission of everyone can contribute, a lot of our practices, and they enable that. And I think it would enable that too in other companies.
Thanks, Sid.
Thanks for the question. Appreciate it.
All right, we're here. Would you rather have a hamster-sized rhino or a rhino-sized hamster?
So there's the practicality, but I don't have to keep it. Rhinos are really aggressive. I think a rhino-sized hamster would be very, very cool. Otherwise, it would just look, yeah, I'm going for the big hamster.
These are shocking answers that I'm getting from our E-team. I'm going to ask every single person on the E-team this question eventually, and I can't wait to get this data and do something important with it.
I'm already visualizing the rhino-sized hamster wheel. That's going to be sweet. Finally, renewable power. Manuel.
Yeah, thank you, Sid. In your career, what was the one colleague who has inspired you the most, and also why that would be interesting to learn?
Yeah, you have a lot of inspiration all throughout your career. I don't know, my first manager, Arthur Bos at Procter & Gamble, left a big impression with his patience and his being very, I don't know, considerate and deliberate about things. But there's many people who've inspired me. I also reflect back really, I don't know, happy about my collaboration with Dimitri. I think as co-founders, it's easy to get into conflict or have a fraught relation, and we both managed to keep it a very healthy relationship all throughout, and I'm really proud of him and me for that.
Thank you.
Wonderful. And we are at time. We can answer the next one's async. Thanks